Over the decade, Islamic finance has evolved and gained remarkable grounds in Nigeria and Africa at large. Globally, Islamic finance assets have seen significant double-digit growth, with 14.9 year-on-year reaching 3.88 trillion in 2024. This is according to the Islamic Financial Services Industry Stability Report. This reflects positive impact of strengthened regulatory frameworks and growing investor confidence. Despite this progress recorded over the years, Africa is yet to fully harness the potential of Islamic finance as a viable source of catalytic capital to meet the annual infrastructure financing needs, estimated to be about 130 to 170 billion, according to the African Union reports. More so, African countries continue to face short-term challenges, including strengthening fiscal and financial stability, ensuring food security, reducing income inequality, and however, this medium and long-term task is even more critical to promote inclusive and resilient growth, build infrastructure, and enhance productivity, confront the risk of climate change and environmental degradation, and empower small and medium enterprise that drive innovation and job creation. To enable Sukuk and other Islamic financial instruments serve as effective drivers of financial intermediation and microfinancial stability across the continent, we must first address the barriers that continue to constrain the growth, like underdeveloped market infrastructure, investor education, and limited liquidity, among others. Also, artificial intelligence is reshaping finance across the continent, automating compliance, personalizing ethical investments, and bridging access gaps. Can this be effectively harnessed for trust building? Does the market have adequate ethical guardrails for responsible development? The solution of these market problems lies in bringing together our diverse strengths to build solutions and truly endure and make the greatest difference where the needs are most urgent. This captures the very essence of ISIF as a platform built on collaboration, shared learning, and collective action. It also informs our choice for this year's theme, Africa Emerging, a prosperous and inclusive outlook. The theme reflects optimism and our resolve that Africa is on the rise, and through coordinated investments, shared knowledge, and aligned strategies, prioritizes our collective expertise and resources in Africa, can drive continent towards a more prosperous and inclusive future.
I always say Islamic finance is about simple common sense. It starts from a very simple and very clear definition of what exactly is lending and what is business. Common sense says you borrow when you have a need to fulfill and you don't have the means to meet that need. That's an essential need. You need food, you need a house to live in, you need clothing, you need to pay your school fees. You don't have money, you borrow. That is what borrowing is. If you have millions and you're trying to invest in a factory or a farm or some enterprise, you're really not borrowing. You're looking for partners in investment. And this is captured in a simple one hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he says that he saw written on the gates of heaven, as-sadaqatu bi asharati amthaliha wa dainu bi thamaniyata ashar that when you give a sadaqah, when you give charity, you get 10 times the reward. But when you give a loan, you get 18 times the reward. And then the Prophet was asked, how come you get more reward for giving a loan than for giving charity? He said, لِأَنَّ السَّائِلَ يَسْأَلُ وَعِنْدَهُ أَمَا الْمُسْتَقْرِضْ فَلَا يَسْتَقْرِضْ إِلَّا عِنْدَ الْحَاجَةِ. Because he who begs or asks may ask even if he has money. And we see people who have money and they go and ask for it. But he who borrows only borrows when he has a need. So the definition is clear. If you go for a loan, it is because of a need, not for business. If you want to do business, you look for an investor. You look for somebody who's putting in money, sharing risks with you, and sharing rewards. So it's simple common sense. And once we understand that, we understand the difference between Islamic finance and conventional finance.
I invite you to, imagine a future where every child has access to stable power to learn. Every child has access to mediums of communication. Entrepreneurs, businesses can reach the world through their phones. And we're able to take advantage of what has happened with the democratization of knowledge, not information. So artificial intelligence, it's a real game changer for the world, because for the first time, a child in Birnangwari has the same opportunity as a child in Boston, because they have access to the same information. So the issue is, what are we going to do to make sure that that child in Isaleko or in Mushin, has the same access to the child in Boston? So I think these are the things that we need to be thinking of to see that future of inclusivity that we're talking about. Now, imagine that transformation financed ethically, inclusively, and sustainably. That is the promise of Islamic finance. Because Islamic finance, at its very core, invests in real assets. Real assets such as roads, power plants, water, digital networks, the arteries through which nations breathe and people prosper. Africa's infrastructure challenge is also Africa's infrastructure and development opportunity. There are several estimates about the amount required for infrastructure across the continent. There are numbers that say it's maybe 130, 170 billion. But I want us to look at it differently. I want us to look at it from things like, what's the minimum energy required in a society? And how much do we need to invest for that to happen? What's the minimum amount of road network that we need? And how much is required for that to happen? What's the optimal rail network that we need? And how much do we need to invest for that to happen? I think until we do that work, we can't really quite estimate the amount of infrastructure investments that are required. I say that because we've made some attempts, through our research, and we found that the numbers are way more than the 130 billion people talk about. So if you take something like electricity, which is so fundamental yet so lacking for our economy. So in Nigeria, for example, if we have constant access to electricity, we're easily $1 trillion economy just by having access to electricity. And then if we go beyond that and try to do import substitution, we'll see that we're a $2 trillion economy. So it's what can we do together collectively to give that life? That should be the focus. And Islamic finance has a critical role to play there. Why? Because it's asset-backed financing. Like the Emir said, it's an investment, essentially, in productive assets that provide real service to economies.